As more people head back to work following the pandemic, there's little sign of let up in the gig economy. That raises the stakes for a likely political showdown over workers' pay, benefits, and flexibility. One coalition, including a major business group, came out early this year for worker flexibility and independence. The other side, the Coalition to Protect Workers' Rights, wants stronger safeguards for pay and benefits. To explain that position, we'd like to welcome the coalition's director, Mike Firestone. Thank you very much for being with us, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Mike, I know this might be obvious to some of our viewers, but at least primarily, which workers are we talking about in this showdown?
Well, this fight matters to all workers in Massachusetts because the law that these big tech companies want to undermine establishes basic protections for all of us. For example, if you're injured on the job in Massachusetts, no matter where you work, your employer has to have a workers' compensation policy so that if you're laid up at home, you're going to get paid. That's the rights that all of us have. These big tech companies like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash don't follow the law right now, don't provide these benefits, and now they want to change the law to make sure that this misconduct can continue into the future.
Well, one thing these companies had going for them in California is that there were at least a certain percentage of workers who liked the idea of being able to set their own hours, maybe only a couple of hours a week, or they like working between 9 and 11 in the morning. So the gig framework worked well for them, but overall, what do you think?
Well, it is certainly true that workers value flexibility, and so do I think all of us. What we've seen over the last year, for example, is that many employers who could never have imagined having their workers work from home, for example, adapted. This shows that within the employment model, where you have basic rights and protections, things can change. Technology can facilitate that. And in fact, this flexibility is central to the company's business model. It's how they run their business. So we believe in flexibility. We just don't think that every other right and benefit and protection that workers in the state get, like civil rights protections, has to be thrown out the window in order to support this flexibility that workers value and that the companies need.
One thing I noticed in California when they had the referendum that locked in this kind of arrangement, Proposition 22, was that employers decided to go along with a base pay, something like $16.80 an hour. It sounds pretty decent, but on the other hand, if you're talking about an Uber driver who's got car expenses and downtime between trips, how does that shake out?
Well, it doesn't shake out well at all. These companies agreed to what they called a minimum wage, but it was only for the time when you were actively giving a ride to a passenger. And of course, it didn't cover wear and tear on your vehicle or reimbursements for gas or any of the other benefits that you and I are entitled to as employees in the state. So drivers are taking home, somewhere between, maybe $6 and $9 an hour all in, which is much less than the minimum wage. And it's one of the reasons why these companies churn through workers so quickly. They're essentially taking a short-term loan against their own vehicle. We don't believe that these big tech companies should be able to spend $100 million on the ballot to change the law here.
What about how this affects consumers? Because if companies are reducing their overhead, then I imagine consumers might be told, well, this will bring down the price for you, so you get something out of this. Do they?
Well, for example, New York City, where the city did, in fact, impose a genuine floor of earnings for all drivers, we saw that driver earnings increased significantly, but passenger costs, the cost of taking these things did not rise significantly. It's just stopped the company from siphoning so much of the money towards the company, their executives, and their investors. But customers are also harmed by this misconduct because if a driver gets in a car accident, the company's position is not my employee, has nothing to do with us. This is an independent relationship. And that's, that's all about these companies, these multi-billion-dollar tech companies escaping liability, the basic responsibilities that they have to customers on the road.
Now, I know the constituency you represent, I think they have a lot of sympathy in the state legislature. The state attorney general seems to be moving in your direction as well. But the model in California with Prop 22 is going to the ballot. What was that like, and what's the lesson for Massachusetts?
Well, the lesson is to get out there early and get organized and really take it to these companies directly. Don't let them call the shots the whole way, because they have a bottomless pit of money that they have because they don't pay their workers fairly. So we're expecting these companies to start on August 4th, file language to go on the ballot and spend $100 million to change our law and strip away basic civil rights and wage benefits from low-wage workers. So we're organizing now in coalition with civil rights groups, community organizations, faith groups, environmental justice organizations, and labor groups to say no.
What about the spending in California? Wasn't it the business side that seemed to be way up there?
Oh yeah, I mean, Uber kicked in $50 million, DoorDash kicked in $50 million, Lyft kicked in $50 million thereabout. These companies spent $210 or $20 million to undermine rights and protections for low-wage workers. And now they want to come here and say we're doing it for the workers. And I think the people of Massachusetts know that that kind of spending is not about the workers. It's about the companies and their profits.
I think until recently, a lot of us thought of the gig economy as something on the fringe of the real economy. But during the pandemic, a lot of us have gotten used to ordering things, whether it's food or books or something. What's the trend here? Is this getting bigger?
Well, certainly we're seeing more and more people who are participating in some of these services. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we maintain civil rights protections and labor standards for workers. If they're going to be expanding, we need to make sure that we're not eroding protections. The other thing is these companies have made clear that they have no intent of stopping at delivery or driving. You've already seen this with, for example, the folks who are in the supermarkets shopping for people. So they want to keep going. Silicon Valley investors have said, this is a great model. We've shed all of our labor costs. We don't have to pay for any benefits. Let's do this to teaching. Let's do this to healthcare. Let's do this to restaurants. And the way to stop them is to hold them accountable for following the law.
I want to talk about your coalition because, the other side, they do have a leading business group. They also have the Urban League. Your group, you have a number of other allies, including the Boston NAACP. Who else is on your coalition?
Well, we're very pleased to have the Mirror Coalition, which is the leading advocacy organization for immigrant families and workers in Massachusetts. Clean Water Action, a leading environmental justice organization. We're just thrilled to have groups like New England United for Justice, which works with Black and Brown communities in Boston. I think when you look at our coalition, you see these are groups that have come together because they have a history and a track record of fighting for civil rights and economic empowerment for marginalized communities. And, we are confident that we are going to be able to get out there and push our message, but we're going to be massively outspent by these big tech companies. And that is why we're organizing now.
One thing we've heard before in one of these conflicts over worker classification was that if these gig economy companies don't get what they want, they'll pull out. Could that happen here?
No. I mean, they will threaten all sorts of things to avoid following the law. They tell their workers that they will lose their jobs if they have to follow the same rules as any small business in Boston. And that's one of the reasons many drivers are confused or hesitant because they are constantly told that their jobs are at risk. It is time for our state to say you cannot buy your way out of basic civil rights protections, basic wage protections.
Well, we should finally mention, and I'm sure this is true of both sides here, there are places online with more details, more arguments, and more updates. So for the coalition you're with, Mike, what's the best way to find that?
Okay, so our website is www.noprop22ma.com. We're saying we don't want to see a repeat of the $200 million campaign by these companies in California, Prop 22. So it's www.noprop22ma.com.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Mike Firestone from the Coalition to Protect Workers' Rights. We'll have more news in just a moment.